Skylar and I are very scrappy individuals. And so we just try to like, piece things together and make it work. And so I feel like we wouldn't thrive as mayor because there's just so many steps involved.
But what you're saying is exactly actually the beauty of folks from this province, but definitely this city is like, we can figure out a way.
Yeah.
Like we can figure out a way.
We'll figure it out.
You hear that we punch above our weight all the time. And the reason is, well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Right?
We're industrious.
Yeah.
It's like, we just got to figure it out. And
Has someone got some duct tape?
Yeah.
Welcome to The Scary is brought to you by RaiseHER Co. I'm Sky.
And I'm Talitha. We are proudly broadcasting from Treaty 4 territory and the homeland of the Métis. In each episode, we tackle the alarming, inconceivable, questionable, shocking, and scary statistics relating to, impacting, and intervening with the lives of women and girls worldwide.
You'll hear the scary truth, take away tools and tips, and learn about what you can do about it. The Scaries is an opportunity to use our voices as women and supporters of women to make real change. We'd also like to note, as usual, that this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is solely our opinions. So please take it with what you will, and note that we could be sharing content that could be triggering to you. So listen with caution.
As straight, cisgender, white, able-bodied settler women, we are aware of the privilege that we have, and we want to use this platform to spread awareness about the scary reality that women from around the world face in different life situations.
Why?
Because sometimes nothing is scarier than being a woman. What is up, Scaries fam? Welcome to today's episode. We are very excited about today's episode because, like our neighbors to the south that everyone can't stop talking about, we're also going through a provincial, municipal, and school board elections in our province and city. I feel like we were almost very close to having a federal election as well, which would have been very overwhelming.
Oh, my Lanta.
Because of this is such a hot topic right now, today we'll be shining a light on the challenges and injustices women often face in politics and hear the experiences and stories from our city's first woman mayor, our current mayor, and today's Scaries podcast guest, Mayor Sandra Masters.
Yes, politics is a tough game for anyone, but for women, the challenges are unique and often unjust, and honestly often prevent women from getting into politics, which is what kind of perpetuates the underrepresentation of them. So from online harassment to, you name it, there's no denying that the political landscape is not really a fair playing field when it comes to women. But here's the thing. Women's political participation is critical for a well-functioning democracy. And the data shows it. More women in policymaking leads to better outcomes on crucial issues like education, healthcare, infrastructure, key things we need to survive.
We need them to survive and live and thrive and all of those things. We've all got an exciting chance to make our voices heard and have a pivotal chance to make a significant change. Voting isn't just a responsibility, it's our power and something that many women fought for a very, very long time before us. And it helps shape decisions on things that impact us and our families. And frankly, it's a privilege, not a right. And so if you don't vote, then you don't really get a say. As women, mothers, and leaders, we know what's at stake. We deserve to have our perspectives front and center in the rooms where big decisions are made. While it's not just about electing women, it's about making sure our voices are loud and clear in shaping the future so that it reflects what we and our families need to succeed. So let's dive into the life of women in politics.
Let's do it. Ooh, I'm so excited for this one. It's going to be good.
Good, meaning that it's going to be real scary.
It's juicy, yes. But before we dive into our interview, which I'm sure you are all really excited for, because I know I am, we have to always share those scary facts. What are we dealing with today? So here's some rapid fire stats for you. Globally, women hold only 27% of seats in national parliaments and about 35.5% in local governments. Even worse, just 27 countries out of, I think, 200 are led by women.
Yeah.
Think about that. Only 27 have women in top leadership positions. And at this rate, it's projected that we won't reach gender parity in global politics for another 39 years.
Oh. I wonder, I don't know like the exact percentage, but I feel like a lot of those women leaders are also like in Icelandic countries.
100%.
We always
most
talk about
of them are like probably 50% of the 27 are in Icelandic countries where things are just thriving. And honestly, the most significant gap is in the cabinet positions, though. So only 23% of government ministries worldwide are headed by women. In fact, 7 countries have no woman at all in their cabinets, which I believe. That's 0. In 141 countries, women hold less than a third of minister positions as well. And at the current rate, we won't reach parity at the cabinet level until 2077. So like 40, 50 years from now. That's just... Will we still be alive? I hope so.
I hope I'm still alive and kicking at 27.
I gotta be alive to see this because this is just not cool.
I just feel like there'll be like this like wonderful case study that we can look back on and say like, what was life like before women were involved in like gender parity in governments? Anyways, we make up half the population, obviously, but we can't even make a dent when it comes to leading cities and countries we all live in. So let's zoom in on Canada and then Saskatchewan specifically, where the numbers aren't exactly thrilling either. In Canada, women make up just over 30% of the federal parliament as of 2023. In 2002, only 25% of cabinet minister members were women. And now since 2016, the number has risen to about 50%. So there's some progress, but we're really far from the finish line. Here in Saskatchewan specifically, 17 women or gender diverse candidates were elected to the provincial legislature in 2020, which made up about 27.9% of the total MLAs. As of late, 2024, the Saskatchewan Party has only nominated 15 women out of 61 candidates, while the NDP fares a little bit better with 31 out of 61. But even with these numbers, there are currently only 6 women in cabinet positions in Saskatchewan. And we will note, we are recording this before our provincial election actually happens. So by the time this comes out, things might change. Those numbers might be very, very different.
Totally.
On the municipal level, Regina has made history with Sandra Masters, our first ever female mayor, but our neighbours in Saskatoon, well, they've yet to elect a female mayor. And it's shocking, but accurate numbers on female mayors in smaller towns are incredibly hard to come by. No one seems to be keeping track, or, I mean, maybe they don't care so much for progress, right?
So before we move on to more inequities that women face in politics, we want to pause and talk about why the underrepresentation of women in politics is so prevalent across the globe, like everywhere you look.
Yeah.
As we've heard before, many episodes we've talked about, a big part of the problem is the systematic barriers that women face when trying to enter a male-dominated field like politics in the first place.
Yeah.
There's the lack of resources and financing to get their campaigns started, limited support networks, and of course, balancing political aspirations with family responsibilities. It's not, I mean, men have that too, but let's be real, it's not to the same degree.
Yeah.
Women are expected to handle it all from all levels, from all areas, from all roles. And it's not easy, especially when you're dealing with hundreds of events a month, as we'll talk about later with the mayor. So let's talk about the challenges that women are facing while they're in politics. In Scandinavian countries like Norway and Finland, those Scandinavian ones we talked about,
our favorite place,
they're leading the charge in gender equity in politics. In Norway, for example, more than 45% of elected representatives are women, so almost half. But those nations didn't get here by chance. It's the result of that systematic, that social encouragement and empowerment of women there. So they have decades of intentional policy and cultural shifts towards equity that have led to get them to where they are. Unsurprisingly to us, having more women around the decision-making tables proves to have a profound policy outcome. A literature review conducted in 2020 found that, in general, data links an increase in female representation with a higher propensity for women legislators to introduce and pass priority bills dealing with issues that directly and disproportionately affect women. Obvious. That makes sense,
of course.
Right? If you have more women, they're going to make things, pass things,
that's going to be their foresight.
Things that focus and that support women and their ability to thrive. Traditionally, this has meant issues like abortion, childcare, all of those types of things, even online harassment. Those are the things that they're building policies around because we know that women are disproportionately affected by those things. So the more women we have, the more women we're going to see some movement and some progress in those areas. Can I get an amen?
Amen, sister. But of course, things can never be simple or easy for us ladies. We've always got to have our boxing gloves on. I mean, and for good reason, especially in the political world.
Mm-hmm.
There is a dark side of politics that likely deters women from entering it or staying in it for a long time. And that is online harassment. This is something female politicians deal with on much more brutal scale than their male counterparts. A 2024 recent article in Chatelaine entitled "Why Canadian Politics is Still Unsafe for Female Politicians" noted that online spaces are becoming increasingly toxic for female politicians. The threats aren't just about policies or debates, so like the work that they're actually doing.
Right. It never is.
No.
It's what are they wearing? What are
yes,
they saying?
it's personal.
Yeah.
It's everything.
They're to this, not enough of that.
Yeah. So from sexualized insults to outright threats of violence, it's clear that misogyny is alive and well in the political arena. In fact, Canada has dropped in global rankings for gender parity in politics, sliding from 56th place in 2021, which is like not great anyways, to 61st place in 2024.
Hey.
The article pointed out that this increasing online toxicity may be part of the reason why female politicians, especially women of color or those with other intersecting identities, are subjected to disinformation campaigns and hate at an alarming rate. Take MP Ikra Khalid, for example. When she introduced a motion to condemn Islamophobia in 2017, she received over 90,000 hateful emails and even had her home address broadcasted on the radio.
What?
Yes, leading to police protection.
Wow.
Yet, she persisted, as women tend to do. And that's the reality for so many women in politics. They're not just fighting for policy change, they're also fighting for their own safety and for their family's safety.
Oh, that makes me so enraged. And this word safety is something that we're going to hear a lot of in this episode, just an FYI.
Yeah.
It really is the root of, I think, why women get into or don't get into politics and how and why and how long they might stay.
Yeah.
But what's even worse about it is the online abuse against women in politics has been happening for years. This isn't a new thing. It's getting worse, but it's been happening for a long time. And it's often fueled by other leaders in politics.
Ugh.
Just look at what's happening with politics down south. And we have a man and a woman running. And I'd actually like to see the stats on the difference, the amount of like online hate and harassment that Trump receives versus Kamala and what we're looking at there. That would be
it's like,
interesting.
it's just so ridiculous.
And
also,
the type
like,
of comments.
yeah,
right?
like the things that you see him speak about her are like very like personal things, like, you know, like about herself as like a human being and all that kind of stuff, where like she
use facts. Like, he did this, he did that, he's past that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Like his policies. Yeah.
Yeah. And the sad thing, the even worse thing is that nothing really has been done to protect these women in politics. So to make it a safer space for future generations to get into this, nothing's really there. Like, yes, we all know this is a problem. It's getting worse, but what are we doing about it to make it safer and more equitable? In 2021, CBC Radio Canada reported that 3 out of 4 candidates running in safe seats were white men. Wow. These men are also received 10% more funding than other candidates. At the very least, political parties could offer training on dealing with online abuse and provide more security for women in politics. Like, let's be real.
Yeah.
But the challenges don't stop there. Women face other barriers like lack of funding to run campaigns, like we talked about, balancing family and work, like we talked about, and not having enough role models in general or mentors in that space.
Yeah.
As long as political leaders don't actively work to challenge male-dominated spaces, progress toward gender equality will continue to be slow.
Yeah.
So it's time to step up, make room for women to lead. And on that note, the moment that you've all been waiting for, that we've been waiting for, is here. It's time to hear from our current leader and mayor, our guest, Mayor Sandra Masters. Well, hello, Mayor Masters. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so happy you're taking the time today. I know we are a very, very busy time right now for you. So
well, thank you so much for having me. Actually, This might be the most relaxing thing I do today.
Oh, good. Good. I can imagine. So yes, super happy to have you here. For all of our Grace listeners, this is Mayor Sandra Masters of Regina. She is proudly Saskatchewan, from Saskatchewan. Her pronouns are she, her. She's called Regina home for more than 25 years and really recognizes the potential Regina has and is driven by a desire to create more vibrant city. She was sworn in as Regina's 35th mayor on November 23rd, 2020, and made Regina's history by becoming the first woman elected and defeating a 2-time incumbent mayor during a global pandemic. It's a crazy time.
Yeah. So many things.
So many things. Encouraged by the unmatched spirit of Regina's residents, Mayor Masters is passionately optimistic about Regina's future and values the outstanding individuals that choose to build their lives here. So again, welcome.
Thank you.
Happy to have you.
All right. So we always start things off, as everybody knows, with some rapid fire questions just to kind of ease into the conversation. So we'll kick things off with rapid fire number 1, which is, if you could grant one wish for all women, what would that be?
Oh my gosh. Oh, one wish for all women. What would that be? Safety first.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I don't actually know if we've heard that one yet.
No.
Yeah. Because if you're safe, imagine what you could do.
Then you can thrive.
Yeah. I think safety first.
I love that.
Oh,
so it's
good.
basic, but like in this province, so important.
Especially. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. Best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ever.
Ever. Oh my. There's so many. I actually will take it back to being a parent. I was a young parent, and I can remember when I had 4 little ones running around, graduated university in 1996. In 97, I had 4 kids. I was separated in 2000. So when I was 30, and I had an older mom, right? So I was quite a young mom, and I'm looking around the room sometimes going, oh my gosh. And the advice that I got was drive your kids everywhere. So always be the parent that volunteers.
Oh, yeah.
And like, if you think about, if you have little ones as they get older and you want to expose them to music and art and sports and recreation and friends and social activities and history, all of the things. If you are the parent that tries to drive they get so used to you being in the car that you hear them talk amongst their friends. You hear who's doing what at school. And you get a sense of your kids' judgment and how they're feeling in relation to the world and their social spheres and stuff. And it just allows you to follow up, right? And then their friends get really comfortable with you. And so, in terms of connection to my kids, in hindsight, it was probably the best piece of parental advice I ever got.
That's a really good one.
I have never heard that, and I love it.
My mother-in-law, she's passed, but her thing was always to have all the kids at the house all the time. So like she would always buy like boxes and boxes of popsicles and juice boxes and treats and everything. And my husband's cousin was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing all this? And she's like, if I control the fun, then I know what's happening with everybody. And I was like, oh, as a control freak, I love to control the fun.
Yeah.
So
it got to the point where like when my oldest is a girl and then I have 3 boys. When my oldest was in high school, it got to the point, and I had a rule, you can't go to other school parties.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Right. Until high school. And then I got to know where you are.
Yeah.
And I can remember it used to get to the point, the whole driving thing, that someone had a curfew at midnight. Like I would get a call. And it would be one of her friends going, Mom, I have to be home in 4 minutes. Where are you, kiddo? I'll come get you and I'll drop you off. And so like my youngest, like he would have friends in his group that would just knock on the door and go, we're just here for tea. Oh, I'm like, okay. And so I get to chat with some girls and find out, again, it's about, can you figure out how they're facing the world and what challenges they're trying to figure out and to be that. And so, it's if you control the fun, or you're the safe place to be, without judgment and not I'm a pretty challenging person sometimes, but not without, thought-provoking conversation.
Yeah.
But you end up being involved in a way that I don't think you get to be otherwise.
Right. Yeah.
Very true.
Makes perfect sense.
I feel like at a certain age, once your kids are, in school, that's really what you are, a chauffeur. So if you're not spending that time with them, you probably aren't spending much time with them.
Yeah.
So love that. Okay. So last question, last rapid fire is, what is your scary? What keeps you up at night?
Oh my goodness.
I'm sure many of things.
Things. I think if I go outside of kind of health and safety for my own kids and my own friends and family, I would say it's trying to figure out how to it sounds so general, but make the city better. Like in a world of so many competing interests, kind of what's next? What piece do you have to put in place in order to build into something bigger? Like, we want to get here. You can't, there's no shortcuts, right? And so, oh my gosh, what do you got to put in place? And then it's every single thing has a path, and then there's all the things, right? And so I think sometimes literally will wake me up at night because my brain percolates at night, right? Like sometimes it's like I take in all the conversations, you read research, you take in information, perspectives, and then I'll wake up and go, oh, it's this, or how do I solve this? Like I got to get through this. And sometimes it's money, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's bringing people together, or I was like, I don't feel like I got the right answer yet. So that's, in terms of keeping me up, that's what wakes me up at night.
Yeah, that's a big question. For
like
sure.
like cold sweat.
Yeah.
Skylar and I are very scrappy individuals, and so we just try to like, piece things together and make it work. And so I feel like we wouldn't thrive as mayor because there's just so many steps involved.
But what you're saying is exactly actually the beauty of folks from this province, but definitely this city, is like, we can figure out a way.
Yeah.
Like we can figure out a way.
We'll figure it out.
You hear that we punch above our weight all the time. And the reason is, well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Right?
We're industrious.
Yeah.
It's like, we just got to figure it out. And
has someone got some duct tape?
Yeah. Exactly. Someone knows a guy who knows a guy who can like help fix the thing. And yeah. Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, those are always rapid fires are never rapid, but I appreciate that. Okay. So going now more into our topic of the day, and finding out kind of, first of all, why did you choose politics? And no judgment in that question, but it's a hard thing to go into. But
I see the look in your eyes.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know why you did it, but can you share your journey into politics, and then even what motivated you to run for mayor in 2020 in a global pandemic, nonetheless?
Yeah. Interest in politics probably goes back to high school.
Okay.
Maybe even before that, but high school for sure. It was just a general sense of economics and history and, social studies and kind of how things work. So I was born in the 70s, like 1970, and I was raised in the 80s. And if you've ever, gone back and looked at issues, well, you would know that in 1988 was the first time that a woman could apply for a loan without the co-signature of a man.
Yes.
Right? And so I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. I had 3 older brothers, very much blue collar, lower middle class parents. And, for whatever reason, I was, from about the age of 12, 13 on, it was nothing for me to sit in a room with the adults and you would hear the conversations, like, because you're the 4th child, your parents are tired, right? And so it's not, you shouldn't be involved in this conversation. You should be whatever. And so there was a piqued interest. And then in high school, really, between my economics teachers, my history teacher, who was a professor, ended up as a professor at the University of Regina, just talking about how the world is in the state it's in at whatever point in time, right? And so I think I was the vice president of the student council in high school, and that was, how do we make it more fun and get community, how to get school spirit, that type of thing, which isn't cool sometimes. So, that's lame. Anyways,
Skylar and I were both on the student council, so like you are speaking to your crowd right now.
So how do you get people motivated to, it's really important that we go cheer on our teams or whatever. And so then, I got pregnant when I was 19, and I was a single mom at 20. And then I went to university at 21. And even then it was just always part of the conversations I was in. And then with kids, and I had 4 by 27, that you end up volunteering with everything, right? Like it's not just the drive your kids everywhere. It's how the world goes around. Like they need someone there for the school lunches. Like, they need folks on field trips. They need, hey, we need someone to serve on the PTA. We need, and you're like, it was a way for me to stay involved in my kids' life and see the environment they're in, but also just understanding that there's not a lot that goes on without volunteer hours being put into it. And so if you want your kids to have a good experience, you got to put in a bit of time, whatever that is. Hey, I've only got 3 hours this month, but what do you need me to do, kind of thing. And so you started to get involved, and then you start to understand the challenges and the opportunities of kind of all of those things that make life worth living and make your, add so much to your kid's life and to the community and all those things. So, and then from that, what happens is when people know you volunteer, they go, hey, are you busy?
Yeah.
And so as my kids grew up, and got older. And I ended up, I remember, with one only at home left. And it was, hey, are you busy? I know you're not, because your kids, 3 of them are gone to university. And I'm like, and so getting involved in boards of directors and other committees, you just start to kind of see the lay of the land. And then back in probably 2019, just a bit of frustration. And I think lots of folks will tell you they're either just driven to participate. And it's like, if you want to make it better, you got to put your name forward. You got to vote. You got to do those things. Yeah. Kind of raged that way. And so in 2019, we were going like, we're kind of stuck. It felt like we were stuck. Right. And because making decisions is hard. And so in an effort to go looking at city council, was just saying like, okay, well, who do we get to run? And then someone turned around and goes, well, why don't you do it? And I'm like, oh, just close your mouth right now.
You shut your mouth
while you're talking to me. So, remind me about that one.
Yeah.
And I don't, like, you're going to get me in trouble. Like, don't say anything. Meanwhile, I was joking around. I was spreading rumors about so-and-so's going to run. He goes, would you stop saying that? I go, well, it's better you than me.
Yeah.
And I ended up having a conversation where you can't get it out of your head. So as months went by, and I kind of went, like, is this a crazy idea? And it's like, no, you'd be really good at it. And I'm like, I say to a friend, and I'm like, no, but I'd be a total long shot because I haven't been on council. I've been in the community, but I haven't been on council. Name recognition is important, like how you win in an election. And I said, other than being a bug on a stick, what's the downside to running? Like, you're just intense attention.
Yeah.
And the answer was, well, the downside might be that you win.
Oh, yeah. Then I actually have to do the job.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. And it's like, but you'd be really good at it, And I'm like, so then I called a friend who was involved in politics. And I said, okay. I said, what makes a qualified candidate? And like, I got a blank stare and go, what do you mean? And I go, well, but what makes a qualified candidate? And the answer was funny. It was like 18 years old and you've, 6 months.
Oh, wow.
You've lived in the city 6 months. I'm like, come on, man.
Can you get 25 signatures?
Can you get 25 signatures and do you have $100?
Yeah.
I'm like, come on. Like, it's got to be more than that. And it wasn't. And I'm like, whew. And I'm like, and then they said, it was the person that originally said, why don't you do it? This is now 6 months later. And I went, but what's qualified? What a female question.
Honestly,
right,
yeah. I was gonna follow up with that.
Give me the real truth here.
Yeah.
Let's be real.
I mean, what's qualified? And I kind of got like a head cock going, seriously, like, you're smart, you work hard, you care about making decisions, you're curious, you ask questions. So why not you? And then I went home and I went, that's a really good question. Why not? And so I called my kids and they said, the first thing you got to do is talk to your kids. So 4 adult children. And it was during the pandemic. Like, this is literally in March of 2020. And I'm like, I got to talk to you guys all. So everyone's, in isolation. And so I call my daughter first, and my son-in-law's jumping around. And I said, he goes, like, what do you have to talk about? This sounds pretty serious. And I
calling a family meeting.
I'm just going to spit it out. And they started laughing. And I said, I think I'm going to run for mayor. And my son-in-law starts jumping in the background of the video going, yeah. And I'm like, my daughter goes, of course you are, Mom. And her concern, which was kind of echoed throughout my children, was, oh my, like, because it can be a nasty place.
Totally.
Like, if you read, right? You just like all of a sudden. And I said, my concern is protecting you guys. Yeah. Luckily, they all have different last names. And I go, what do you think? And they're like, yeah, you're competent. You're like, yeah, you're driven. Nobody works harder than you. Like, those. I'm like, okay. So then I left my oldest son for last. And then I called my middle son, who was out in Halifax getting his engineering degree. And I call him and he goes, what's up, Mom? And I go, I'm thinking about running for mayor. And he starts to kind of chuckle and he goes, uh-huh.
No one is surprised.
He's like, why not, Mom? And I'm like, yeah, that's the question. Why not? And he goes, I can't think of a reason other than, like, it's kind of brutal out there.
Yeah.
So then my youngest son, who was going to university at the time, walks upstairs and I said, so you should know right away before your siblings start texting, I'm thinking about running for mayor. And he kind of stops in his tracks and he goes, really? And I'm like, yeah, what do you think? And he goes, well, you could do it. And then he goes, but thank God we have different last names. So my life would be over. And then I called the hard nut, like my oldest son, who was out in Toronto at the time. And I this is what I'm thinking of. And he's like, wow. And he just immediately, unfortunately, like turnabout's fair play, like payback. He goes, okay, so what about the internet? And what about like, trolls? And what about, people controlling your message? And what about just the abuse you're going to take, Mom? This is going to be hard. I said, I'm more worried about the abuse you will take. Like if folks figure out and they come for you. That's my only concern. And he goes, no. He said, this has to be about, no, Mom. He said, this is a mental health issue. And he goes, you have no idea. He's in technology. He's a computer science guy. Yeah. And he goes, you have no idea what people can do on the internet. And he goes, but municipal, maybe it's not as bad as federal. And he's like, he's literally going through it. And he goes, don't dismiss this. This is important. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, and so I just let myself be lectured to, because that's important. Yep. And he goes, and I said, okay, can I ask you a question? I said, I appreciate that. I won't be flippant about it. I appreciate that this is going to could be hard from a just the feedback you get all the time. And I go, can I ask you a question? He goes, yeah. Is that reason enough not to do it? Oh, absolutely not, Mom. You should totally do it. So it was perfect. Yeah, it was really interesting. And so, and then essentially, and then you run. And why mayor? The city of Regina, I was a single mom of 4 kids. As preteens. And so then I brought them up, and from the city of Regina, from all of the activities they participated in, from their schools and their teachers, the city offered an environment in which my kids were allowed to participate in things and never feel like they didn't have all of these opportunities. And that's park space, and that's rec space, and that's safe streets. And again, we don't do education, but teachers have been amazing, and their coaches and their assistant coaches. So everybody who touched my kids' lives and the environment in which they got the opportunity to try so many things was massively important. And so accessing things in a reasonable way, it is the quality of life that we talk about, right? That's fundamentally, you understand the role that cities plays in your day-to-day and how important that can be to launch, global citizens. Right. That's fundamentally why. And then I have learned more about sewers than I ever want to tell.
All the little things you never thought you'd have to know. But
and you're like, no, let me tell you about this sewer system.
You want to talk pipes? I can talk pipes.
The old poo pipes. Okay, right.
So you told us about your experience, considering being mayor, but what about being the first mayor who's a woman? What was the thought? Like, did that even cross your mind? Or was it just like, okay, I'm just going to be mayor? Like, and what does that mean to you? The fact that you are the first mayor of Regina that's a woman?
I was always involved in male kind of dominated industries, right? Like whether it was finance or whether it was agriculture or serving on the board of Hungry Regina, you're always kind of, and I don't think we walk around thinking I am woman, like you're a person, right? Like, and yet again, child of the 70s, really familiar with kind of the rights for equity and equitable opportunities, very much so. In fact, I resented the question when I first got elected, which is, how does it feel to be the first woman mayor?
Yeah.
And if you've ever heard me answer this question, I don't know. The doors work the same. Like, I don't know how to answer the question. And it was when I met some young schoolgirls and they were looking up and I'm like, oh, like it was a few months in. I'm like, oh, I get it. To see it, to be it, kind of thing. Yeah. But when I was running, there were rumors. Oh, I think Sandra's thinking of running for mayor. I tell you, there's no bigger gossips than men on a golf course.
Oh God. Yeah.
And so I would have folks reach out and hey, you've got time for coffee? Like a friend. And I'm like, sure, I got time for coffee. And I could I was playing now at this point in time. And they were like, kind of, fidgeting. And I'm like, so heard any rumors?
Yeah.
Oh, thank God. I'm so glad you asked. And I'm like, are you seriously considering this? And I said, yeah. What do you think? You have to do this. And I'm like, I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
No. You have no, I think this is really important. And this was a 60-plus-year-old man. And he's like, you have to do this. And I'm like, why are you saying that? He goes, because the time is here.
Yeah.
He said, I think you have an advantage because you're a woman. And I kind of sat back and he goes, did I just offend you? And I said, no, but I'm going to tell you, at the time I would have been 50. Yeah. I said, in my 50 years, never in my imagination did I think I would think that was advantage in a political race.
Right.
And he kind of goes, oh, no, what I totally think it is. I just think we're ready for it. We're ready to have someone representing our city who is a woman. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's kind of wild. So again, at that time, there was 9 running for mayor. I was the only woman. And so it was an advantage because the press picked up on it.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have mattered if it was me or anybody else, to be honest. But if you can be articulate and you have ideas and you have passion for things and you're curious and open, then it's even better, right? Like you can do those things. I will tell you that during the pandemic, because the first year and a half were a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
That I was elected. And so I did a lot of Zoom calls. And so I'd get outreach from teachers and brownies and sparks and cubs. And I can remember doing this with 6-year-olds. And the parents are in the room, but all these little faces and they just have questions. What's your favorite animal? And do you have dogs? Do you have kids?
Yeah.
What's the best thing about being mayor? Anyways, so one of the moms who had been in the room, I'm at an event during the Canada's Farm Show or something. And this woman walks up to me and she goes, you don't know me because you wouldn't have seen my face, but my son was one of the kids that you talked to on the Cubs a couple months ago. And I said, oh my gosh, it honestly brings me such joy because they're such simple questions.
Yeah. They're not hard hitting.
And she says, I thought I would share with you. I was driving him and his buddy who was also on the call. I was driving them to whatever. And I go, yeah. And she goes, we were talking about something and your name comes up. And my son's little buddy leans in and goes, hey, can boys be mayor?
Oh my God. I love that.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so
he doesn't know.
He doesn't know. And so you think and reflect upon someone who's 6, who's now 10 years old, or 10, who's now 14. That see it to be it. I think especially it just is all of a sudden, well, of course this is a possibility. Of course it's the same.
Yeah.
In a way.
I love that. I have to share a story on the way here, and it aligns with this. Dropping off my 4-year-old at my mom's, who lives like across the street here, and I was like, I'm rushing. I'm like, hey, we've got to get dropped off. I was like, I'm going to go interview the mayor, and she's like, oh, the mayor, what do they look like? Or no, she said, what does she look like? And I was like, oh, because she's only she's 4. She's only known you as the mayor. Yeah. But she's like, I'm like, pulled up your Instagram. I'm like, this is what she looks like. And she's like, oh, awesome. Like, so excited. Let me know how it goes. But the fact that she said, what does she look like was like, oh, this warms my heart.
Yeah.
Right?
You're doing a good job.
Yeah.
I love that. Anyway, just to share that.
There is a huge responsibility of, you were on an event of ours, like I think right when and it was a Zoom event and everything else. Yes. And a similar question kind of came up, and you had said like, well, yeah, like what's the difference? Like, yeah, the door, I don't know if you said exactly the door.
Computer works the same.
Yeah, everything. But, and which like, that really should be the reaction is like, yeah, man, woman, like non-binary, gender diverse, whoever it is, if you're qualified and you have the curiosity and all those things. But at the same time, there is such a responsibility because those little kids do look up to you. And like, Skylar's daughter now thinks that only women can be mayors, and which she should anyways.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So, okay, well, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so now we're going to go into some of your inequities and experiences that you've faced. And that's just an assumption, but I can imagine that there probably are some experiences that you faced that were maybe challenges or opportunities that came about while in this role solely because you're a woman.
Yeah. So I think there's a piece of this which is different for me, I think, than someone like your age.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Like I think you're the age of my daughter.
Yeah.
And so because you're through the 70s and the 80s and the equality and all of the different things that we've made advancements on, and we have compared to where we were, like harsher sentences for sexual assault, I just think should be a natural. So I think about it in the context of where we've come from where I started.
Yeah.
And so I miss some of it. I miss some of it because it is a little bit of how you're raised and your experiences that you're
conditioned.
You're conditioned to it. One of the challenges, I think, I will say one of the challenges is just a deeply ingrained sense that women can't lead. or that we're homogenous. Right. And so I kind of chuckle sometimes and, do this a lot, which is I will get from one place, well, one can't lead. You can't be firm enough. You can't make decisions. You're too soft. You're not enough.
Right.
And then on the other side, I will hold where you're too authoritative and you're too businesslike and you're not enough compassion and empathy. And I'm like, what? Cute story. I have a friend who plays on a senior men's hockey team, and one of his teammates' dads is like a 93-year-old, and he's going through dementia. But his dad has always been deeply involved in politics, and so he's hanging out, and he tells the story in the dressing room. He goes, "Yeah, I went to see my dad yesterday," and he was like, "I don't know what's going on federally and provincially," and he goes, "And with the city," he said, "Where the hell is the mayor?" But that mayor's wife sure is busy.
Oh.
And so you have an age differential always. And so it's like you deal with a deeply ingrained sense of that in certain generations. And then you have a something else, which I don't think is gender specific. It's just, we want someone to be this and you're not that. And no one person can be everything.
Yeah.
There's that. On the opportunity side, I had a moment. So early on, I had some outreach from someone who was leading a charge on an MMIWG, murder missing Indigenous women and girls, and Two-Spirited now. Like we're kind of, and we need to do something as a city as it relates to this. Like we know there's different things happening. Okay, and so she reached out, and it was very much you need to do this, and we need to do this, and we need to do this, and I'm like, okay. All right. I said, and I went to then Tribal Chief Edmund Bellegarde of File Hills Compel Tribal Council, who's a friend and who we just committed to meeting monthly at the time. We're just going to meet monthly. We're going to talk about things in a safe space. And the opportunity was, like I said, I want to know if you're okay with my sitting with, at this particular time, this person was employed through one of the FHQ companies. If you're okay with the mayor sitting with, one of your executive directors, because I need to understand. Like I can't say I know everything because it hasn't been my experience. And they're like, he's like, yeah, absolutely. But you should also ask so-and-so because there's a balance. This is all passion and fire. And this is just methodical logic and whatever. I was like, oh, that'd be awesome. So made that phone call and we met with the police chief, then Evan Bray, and said, hey, we're looking at doing this. And, oh, you know who you should invite. And so we invited another Indigenous woman to be around the table. And so I started in year one, where I would hold we try every month. And so that means about 6 times a year we get together. Yeah. But I would have these 3 Indigenous women, all leaders in their own right and kind of breaking barriers in their own right. But I needed a safe space to go, like, I don't necessarily understand. I haven't walked that walk. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know that experience. But I had a moment probably in the 3rd time we did it. And there was a lot of laughter, like cry laughing and also crying because they're sharing stories about murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, like from Regina. I'm just like, and you hear the just raw pain in their voice about the way women were judged whenever these losses occurred. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my Lord. And then just ridiculous laughter, like about inappropriate jokes, like really inappropriate jokes and a lot of swearing. And but I had this, I stepped back and one of them said, never in my life did I think I would be sitting around eating pizza and having pop and I used to think, 2 hours, and it would be 4 hours. Yeah. But I got to ask all the questions I wanted to ask. They got to ask the questions, and it was about access. All of a sudden they just kind of had this moment where, and they said it, not me. And I was like, and it was a comparison to all the men mayors before, like this just wouldn't happen. And what couldn't happen. Yeah. Right. And so there's a piece of it, which is when I look around, and again, I don't look at it differently. Like whoever it is presenting themselves with ideas or challenges or opportunities, and can the city get involved, or can you use your influence to advocate, to celebrate, whatever. Yeah. But this was a moment where I'm like, I was gaining invaluable access to information and insight and safe space to ask really, okay, I heard this. What does this mean? And why do people say this? And I would get their context of it or their view of it, because these women were all like my age, right? Yeah. And had seen some nonsense in their lives, right? And so, but it was this moment of, I don't even think about it. Right. to the point where people go, hey, you want a meeting? Yeah. Do you want to meet for coffee, or you want to come up to the office? And they go, oh, I'll come up to the office. I don't think about them. Like, you don't think about the mayor's office but all of a sudden, okay. So that's a big deal. That's, to some people, that's a big deal. That access and that ability to just contact somebody who knows somebody and says, hey, I have a friend who you should hear from about some issues or some opportunities. And it's like, yeah, absolutely. And so if you keep doing that, it was that access to the table and to building real relationships, which I'm like, because these women in their lifetime, it never would have happened.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. So it was, that's the piece of the opportunity. I think there are always challenges. There are always going to be challenges, but it's about, where do you create opportunity and access?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So this is a very generalized, sweeping statement, but I think that women also generally take the time to get to know people and to learn stories and to find out, passions and whys and everything behind, and motivations behind why they care about certain things. Whereas, and again, generalized, sweeping statement, don't come for me, but men often are like, okay, what's point 1, point 2, point 3, let's do it, let's get it done. And and they kind of move on.
Yeah. Yes. And in a weird way, I am both.
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes
you're the too much and not enough.
I'm too much and I'm not enough.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just, and I've had to learn this lesson by mistakes. And so without paralyzing you to advancing action, there is sometimes where the process is almost more important than the thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, just get something done.
Yeah.
And so there is probably, and I didn't do it well in the first year. I can admit to that fully. Probably the last year I started to actually, that awareness piece where it's like, you should just stop and step back.
Yeah.
And figure out which path you need to take on this. Mm-hmm. You need to not react emotionally to this. And I say emotionally, but mostly irritation and anger, mostly. Because there's never enough time. There's never enough money. And it is a constant ask.
Yeah.
And so you have to, I've been telling people lately that, because I said, I'm only running one more term. You should only, because it's about ideas. It's about energy. It's about fulfill kind of some of what you meant to do, make it better so that the next council and mayor can actually have a platform to leap off of. Right.
Right.
And so, and they said, really? How long things take to get done? Wouldn't you? And I went, nope. If I can't get it done or to the place where we're 25% away and this is a done deal, it's in construction or the policy is in place and it can be grown upon. I said, no, because you can be a you should have to death. You know what you should do?
Yeah.
You know what you should do? And it takes a lot when you have a lot going on across, you think 60 lines of businesses, plus all the social aspect, plus the advocacy, plus the celebration, that it's an instant irritation. Gee, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
When you've spent hours and hours and endless meetings and all of these things, and I have to snatch it back. Almost where you get conscious about snatch it back, Sandra, because that person cares about this city.
Mm-hmm.
They care about this issue, and nobody can possibly know what you know. Right. And I can't possibly know what other experts know. And so you got to snatch it back because you're trying to go full throttle all the time. And so it's really difficult sometimes. And that self-reflection piece. And I just don't know that anybody gets it 100% right all the time, but I find that people find you approachable, accessible, and if I get it, and if you built relationships or understand people's intentions, this person has great intentions. And so if they ever reach out in the future, you get a text or you get a message it's like all the staff in the mayor's office also know, Sandra's going to say yes to this.
Yeah. She's
going to say yes to this because it's coming from this place. And sometimes there's something here.
Yeah.
It's unformulated. It's unworked out. But my EA will know, she's going to want to do, because someone has maybe received encouragement or said, you're onto something. Think about this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Let me know as you worked through it, because I can't take things on, right? Sometimes people come to you and they're like, I have this problem. And I'm like, super. And some are 100% ours. We'll figure that inside the city, but we have this opportunity and whatever. I said, okay, so what are we going to do about it? Because here's my role.
Yeah.
In this, what do you need me to do? Like, do you need introductions? Do you need access? Like, what do you need? And sometimes people go, whatever. Like, what no. My job is not to be your mother and take care of this for you.
Yeah.
Your job is to, I got a role to play, but we all have a role to play. And that's, I've said recently to people that it feels like finally in the last 9 months, like when I follow up with different, especially organizations and associations, I was like, you're doing what? Oh my gosh, that's like what was an idea 2 years ago. It's like, just go, just keep going. You keep going. And then people are reaching out going, I need to update you on where we're at. And I'm like, because if you feed it to me, it sits in the head bank and all of a sudden it gets fed somewhere else. And you just feel a little bit of, some of the parts is now greater than the whole, where everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction and at different speeds. But it's like, holy cow, we got some momentum here.
Yeah.
On cool issues.
Yeah. And things are actually happening. That's great.
Yeah. Delicate balance between listening and doing. I can imagine I heard on the radio, I think you were doing an interview with on CJME and it was like, you go to like something like 150 or something events a year. Like I can only imagine a month. Like what?
Sorry, what?
Yeah.
Is it a month?
It's a month.
Oh my gosh.
No, and I think 80 would be a quiet month. That would be January, right? Because folks are gone and whatever. We felt like August, we knocked it. Like we're like, I did how many? But so that's apart from, I sit on the library board. I sit on the city center core committee. I sit on audit and finance. I'm by legislation on the police commission. I'm a member of executive committee. I am the chair of the school board council liaison committee, and I chair council. I think that's what I'm on, right? And so, I think that's what I'm on. And so that's aside from those legislated and committee things, which has prep work. And as you know, 800-page, agendas and reports and conversations you have to have. And so aside from that, we managed to go to 154 in August, but 80 would be a slow month. And so that's other meetings. That's, folks reach out and go, hey, blah, 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 blah. Here's what we're doing. That's ambassador visits, that's ribbon cutting, that's evening events, that's cultural events, that's art events, that's that's why I say, like, you end up, if you're willing to put in that kind of work, you can't not know what's going on. And so anytime something comes up, it's like, I have never heard of this. How is it possible? Like there's pieces of it which, this is really exciting that you're doing this. And I think that openness kind of builds on openness.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And it's like how important it is that you show up for the folks who are there. Like, it's the fact that, the mayor's coming and that she'll say a few words and whatever else. Like, someone said to me recently, God, you and Skylar are at literally everything. And I was like, yeah, I know. But we just sit. Like, we don't even do anything. And you're also at all those events and you're speaking or you're giving greetings or you're doing something.
And I have moments of identity issues where I was like, look, it's just Sandra. Sandra's showing up.
Yeah.
And you always, and it's actually a really important moment I had early on, which is, why do so many people want to talk to me? Like 3 months in going, like, what's the most, like, everyone wants to talk to me.
Yeah.
Which anyways. And it's like, it's the office of the mayor. And so my reflection after budget last year and going into January, going, you know what? You serve the office. This isn't about Sandra.
Yeah.
It's about you serve the office of the mayor. And if it's important to this Sri Lankan cultural festival that I attend, then I attend.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can only spend an hour. Sometimes, and I don't like to do flybys very much. And sometimes people come back, no, even if you're there for 15 minutes. And I'm like, I know, but it doesn't feel respectful to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure you have to leave. I go, no, I got another half an hour. I can say. And so I don't like to do flybys. Sometimes when you're doing 154, it is a flyby. But it's, if it's important to people that the mayor show up, then the mayor shows up. And then it's like, I can get 8 invitations for the same night.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're like,
how do you decide?
How do you decide? Who did I say yes to first?
Yeah. Picking favorite children.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit and dig into some of those red flags that your oldest son gave you around some of the online bullying and trolls, and what has that experience been like for you over the last 4 years? How have you navigated it? I think we've had a whole episode on this topic alone, but specifically around, your role and what that looks like. And is it gender based or is it not? And like, how have you navigated?
I made a commitment early on. I don't read social media comments.
Oh, yeah.
It was Sandra Bullock standing up when I think on her 50th birthday, she was at an event. She goes, I don't recommend ever Googling yourself. Yeah. Don't do it. And then she read comments about herself. And I'm like, there is not enough mental health in the world for an individual to deal with that kind of constant criticism about a policy, about an execution of something, criticism about, I don't believe in that. All day long. I can take those emails come in all the time, but nonsensical, you're against me. And then I'm like, I hate what you did. You should be dragged through the streets by your ankles. You're an embarrassment. You're like, those types of things no one needs to see. And in fact, I had to have a moment with my communications girl to say at one particular point in time going, I don't pay anybody enough to read this. Like, nobody gets paid enough in the world to read these comments because I think it affects everyone, right? Like, it's just, and so I don't read the social media comments. And then every now and again, I'll have a friend who captures a tweet. Like, Twitter is hell.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not calling
it the most hateful place. Yeah.
And then the problem is it's also funny. So it's like an addiction, right? I'm just waiting for the funny meme. Yeah. And then it's all this. Anyways. And so it's like, you got to take a break. Like, just even 12 hours, 3 days, just step away from it and allow it to happen. We got asked once, why don't you hide these negative comments? Because people need to see, like, profanity laden ones, violent ones, you hide, but people need to see how people are behaving. Because I'm going to tell you, face to face, it is not at all the same.
No.
Like, not at all the same. And I think anytime you can create a behavior that is that disconnected from how folks appear in public, there's an issue in between that space. So I don't read social media. And then people will send me every now and again, they'll clip something from Twitter and send it to me. I go, so you missed the part about where I don't read this?
Yeah.
So people so folks who had my text, like they started to back, like, I don't get them up unless they're funny. And every now and again, people who know my sense of humor know when I think it's funny. It's, I will get virtual hugs just randomly sent to me. Oh. And so my joke is all of a sudden I say, hey, just checking in on you. Just wanted to send you a virtual hug. You're doing great. Keep going. Keep toughing it out. And the joke in the office is, oh, it's pretty bad out there right now. It's pretty bad out there. My job is to be likable and open and curious and researched and always trying to think of the best for the city. But I don't care if you like me because you don't know me. Yeah. My value as a person is tied to my children and my grandchildren and the friends that I have had for decades.
Right.
They know me. They know where I've screwed up. They know they know my faults better than anybody. And they love me because we realize that every human being is imperfect.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for perfect, I'm not your girl. But if you're looking for someone who will put in the work to try to do their best, I'm your girl.
Yeah. It's something that Skylar and I try to live by, or at least I do for sure, is that not everyone is going to like you, but the people who love you are going to love you really, really hard. And that's really easy for us because, I mean, we stand on like, they shouldn't be polarizing, but they're polarizing issues. And, like we talk about things and we advocate for things and that sort of thing, but it's also a little bit easier for us because we don't need to be favorable to everybody, and we're not seeking votes for people and that sort of thing. So there's a really interesting kind of segment where you have to live of like knowing that not everyone's going to like you, but also being likable because you're leading the city where people live and they, have vested interest in various parts of it comment on that.
Yeah. Because I reflect on this often, just in terms of moving public opinion,
right?
Because you do need public support. And so how do you know? I have a job where some of what I do just upsets a bunch of people, but it's the right decision,
right?
And then having to get to do the job to make the right decisions by popularity. Okay.
It's a weird place to be.
But that is where the balance lies. Yeah. And you can move folks so far and you got to pause and let them catch up. You got to let progress cement itself or you'll lose it. That's actually because you can see what's right. and you're like, we need to get here. And again, I think because I'm a child of the 70s and the 80s, I know where we need to get to. What can you push and then just have it get cemented? And we're good? Okay, now we're going to go to the next step and whatever. And that progress, which feels like inches gained. It's a game of inches, Al Pacino. But it's how do you, we know we need to get there. Like that's the right thing to do, but you actually can't go there without public support. Mm-hmm. And so you push and then you wait to cement it where it's just, well, of course that's the right thing. And then you keep going and you got to let people catch up. And that's a hard thing because you got some folks who are like, you should just be there. I'm like, okay, yes, that is the pathway. And it's an impatience and it's a frustration and it's people deeply tied to some of these issues, like emotionally tied to some of these issues and rightfully so. Right. But you're like, not everybody's with us. We need 50 plus 1% to come with us. Right. And so how do you, communication is probably one of the like when I can sit down and we just have conversations, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
exactly. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the last 4 years and some of the things, policies, events, initiatives that you've put in place that you're most proud of around supporting women and gender equity. Can you share and speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think ensuring that women are at the table and have access is probably one of those things that I'm really proud of. And people will say, well, it's always about qualifications. And it's like, it's always about qualifications. It's always been about qualifications, but you were ignoring qualified people before, right? You know, like you lived through that period. I think that's really important. If I was to point to specifics, I think the YWCA in terms of advocating for that to be part of our ISIP funding and to grant funding and support for infrastructure to allow that to move forward. And to make that case to folks. Part of what the mayor does is, because you're only one vote on council, right? Mm-hmm. And so part of what the sphere of influence you have from, working a lot of days and appearing a lot of places and having a lot of conversations is that you can advocate, you can amplify, and you can celebrate in a way that others can't and can hopefully put it on people's radar. And so the YWCA is a really big one. The Two-Spirit LGBTQ plus one, the policy that we've adopted. And what you're trying to do is apply a lens to decisions that you make, right? And it's everything from onboarding staff and educating like internally, like we've got a lot of employees, like 2,300, ensuring that the police, RPS are doing those same things, that there's just an awareness and an education piece. But gender neutral washrooms, like as an example, like when you apply that lens, you're like, hey, we need gender neutral washrooms. So if you think about Wascana Pool, and you think about how we established those bathrooms, that was intentional in terms of it. There's no segregation. It's just everybody's everybody and we're all good. And so safe space, I think, is one of those things that you need to pay attention to. So in terms of what the city is responsible for, it is water and sewer and garbage, but it's also all those recreation and community spaces that we create and making sure those feel safe. I think it's a massively important thing.
How do you work with and manage the conflicting, or I'll say, conflicting with air quotations, because it's probably conflicting to you as a person and to like your values and different things, with what, provincially is happening or with what federally is happening and how it impacts our city and the people who live here?
Yeah. I say my job is to be nice to everyone, like, too authoritatively sometimes, but my job is to be nice with everyone. And so in terms of the provincial government who control health and education and a portion of the justice system and all of those, economic variables that play into this, is where does the city play and align with what they're trying to achieve? You do the same thing with the federal government, and those sometimes are at odds with each other. The reality is in every Venn diagram, there's a huge amount of crossover. And so, and where is the federal government playing and how are we creating programs or have initiatives we want to achieve that align with their values that we can get? Because half of it is about you trying to get money, right? You're trying to have relationships with people and you're trying to have money. And so I try to maintain that you don't kick sand in the faces of people you're trying to have a relationship with. I think that's a good premise. It doesn't always work out that way, but whatever. I think it's if you're always looking elsewhere, you're going to miss something where you're supposed to play.
Right.
And so our jobs are these things, and how do we apply the policies that make the city safer and more welcoming and celebrating, like celebrate, vibrant, I guess is the word you're trying to say, where you're like, people feel like this is really cool. How do we do that in a way that kind of ignores in some ways what else is happening, right? Because if you're going to get into a fight all the time, you're going to waste a lot of energy, a lot of capital, and a lot of like both personal and professional. And you're not going to be able to achieve the things that all of a sudden it's like, hey, where did this come from? Which is just how we do it now. And, we're working on an Indigenous framework for the city, which is we just want to make sure people are educated and that we have a lens when we're going to make decisions. And women entrepreneurs, women, business owners, and we look at that when we assign committees and all these kind of things where we're looking at, marginalized folks, disabled folks, that you're looking at how do you make sure they're at the table type of thing. And I just think sometimes if you go about doing the work with your values behind you, then what's happening elsewhere, like, don't let it distract you from making improvements where people live, like how they interact with their physical environment and space. We're responsible for that. Right. And so just stay focused on making what you do better, more inclusive, safer, and it'll just be more inclusive and safer.
Yeah. It'll just win.
Focus on what you can control, right?
Yeah. So obviously we know that you're running again to be reelected for mayor. So we want to know if you can share a little bit about some of the key elements of your platform that directly support or, encourage or lift up women and girls in our community.
I think generally speaking, there's a piece of it which you don't want to create policies that target it. It is about having relationships with folks like the YWCA or Regina Treaty Status Indian Services, with Sophia House, that you can amplify and advocate for those. Safety is a huge deal, like in this province, like you're saying. And so through the Regina Police Service and their partnership now that's in its, what year is it in? Year 10, year 8, with the Regina Area Sexual Assault Center, and really revamping the way that they're addressing how they interview, the process they go through, the referral mechanisms and the support that they provide. And so an example is, with the hiring of new police officers, ensuring that there is someone specially trained in sexual assault response on every patrol. So there's never not that type of support there. I think from a domestic violence perspective, there's on average like 22 calls a day on domestic violence in the city. And so having a police chief that's looking at that going, okay, if we're really going to do something about it, then what if we had someone specially trained on domestic violence on every shift? Because you've managed to hire, patrol officers enough that you can actually now specialize in that. And then advocating for the roles of all those community-based organizations or social services or healthcare who are trying to improve and make a difference, and focusing in on areas that of the city which are more impacted. So North Central revitalization, which we've passed earlier this year, but continue to do. We got some $2.9 million in funding over 3 years from the federal government on anti-violence, and so we hired some consultants, some Indigenous consultants, to come in and really look at youth, which apparently is 29 and under. I didn't know that when I was 29, but anyways.
Oh.
You're so young.
So we're still so young.
So young. I don't know about
you're part of the youth.
Close.
Yeah. But their feedback was about anti-gang involvement and anti-trafficking involvement and those types of things. Was get to the 6 to 10-year-olds. Okay, so how do you support a program at something like Scott Collegiate that basically provides employment to high school students, that mentor so kids got a place to go play. We've extended hours at Mamawe Atherton Center. So on a Friday night, you can come and participate as opposed to make a different choice, right? It's about, and in a safe space that has great mentors, that the kids are getting paid to do because, employment. And so if you can, we know that like the city center has the most police calls, and we know the stats. And so how do you intervene in youth programming and advocate for dollars from both levels of government to make sure that you can, it's about creating safe space, alternatives, and support so that maybe part of the problem is, that it's 5 years stat down the road and it's a 10-year stat down the road that you're going to be impacting, but it's crucially important. So that would be some of the stuff. And then the reality is, as women entrepreneurs of Saskatchewan, from an economic perspective, really, it's broad-based because it applies to everybody, but investing in those things where people can create jobs, where people can create economic independence is a big deal too. And so it is wastewater. So like, I'm going back to sewers, but it is wastewater capacity so that folks can build things that are women's shelters or safe housing. From a housing security perspective, we just did a deal with Sask Housing Corp in the province and Silver Sage Housing Corporation, where we got 10 of their houses for $1.
Oh, wow.
And in partnership with the city and Silver Sage, doing rent to own and rent to equity. Nice. And we're talking about generations of Canadians that have never owned a home.
Yeah. Wow.
And then doing home ownership, financial literacy, home ownership, lessons every year, but really creating savings and housing security for women and children and seniors and mushums and cookums who are taking care of, generations. So how do you create a pathway, which we know is one of the pathways that, middle class, they build wealth through home ownership.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. I love that. I have a follow-up question. I know, without sharing too much on your platform and all of that, when you think about how you want our city to be represented to the public, to the citizens within it, moving forward, what is that vision for you? And I'm going to circle back and, we've had some struggles branding our city in the last couple of years. Yeah. We've been vocal about our feelings on those. And, we want to make sure that as citizens, our city is an inclusive, it's representative of what we stand for, the pride that we have in it. So tell us about how you envision, what is your vision for the brand of our city and what that looks like?
Yeah, I think my vision for it, actually, number one, is to stabilize it a little bit. But we are massively misunderstood everywhere that I go. Even during the last election, I had friends texting me going, I just had a buddy of mine in New York say, did Regina really just elect a woman? And you're like, yeah, you just elected a woman. So I think that there's a celebration and advocacy about the representation that women leaders do have in our city. You think SGI CEO, you think Sastel CEO, you think Regina Housing Authority, Regina Hotel Association. So we have a lot of women leaders in our city already who support one another. I think from a brand perspective is you want to be known as a city where opportunity exists for everybody, right? And so I have someone on the hotel, and part of that is have you got queer representation out there selling our city? We do. Have we got women out there? Have we got people of color who are in positions of influence? So when someone calls in, it's like, oh, this is the vice chair of the Chamber of Commerce, and it's like you're creating space everywhere. I think that's massively important. You hired a police chief who is the first Muslim police chief, I think, in Canada, a person of color. And so it's like, we didn't know this about Regina. I get this all the time. I know. We have a tendency to put our heads down and not celebrate ourselves. And then, if you trip and whatever, you're like, okay, now you got to come back from that. We are a clean city. We got to work on safety, but you want to be known as a safe city and somewhere where you can have a good quality of life and there's cool things to do. People will come for a job, but they'll stay for culture, right? And that culture piece is a big bucket. And so celebrating local artists, having Indigenous artists in residence for the first time, but also investing in public art and the Globe Theatre and all of these, city center, creative center, investing in those things which elevate and promote the things you're trying to promote, right? So you have representation across the board. I think that's it. I think that you want to be a city that can do nice things, is beautiful, and is safe to raise a family in, but also to be a woman in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I went to school in Toronto for a year, and when people found out that I was from Saskatchewan and then from Regina, they're like, "Do you need a passport to get there? Like how, or like to leave? Like what?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "Do you know about like that you can like do this?" And I'm like, "We don't live in a hole. Like we are just small. But we're mighty, and there's all of these things that are really wonderful about our city." And then, I mean, now I work for a company that no one else works in Regina. Everyone else works elsewhere. And it also kind of not the same thing, but they were like, oh, wow, like, didn't even know that you guys had these sort of things happening in Regina. And I was like, again, I know that we're small and I know that we're like in the middle and sometimes we miss trends or we're a little bit late on trends, but we're still very vibrant and we have lots of things going for us.
I think, but part of it is about getting people here.
Yeah, totally.
Like the amount of, I don't know if you
Don't
have
need
any
a
friends.
passport.
Yeah, it happens all the time where I said, tell me, because I'll get challenged on this. And I said, tell me someone who's never been to Regina that comes to Regina and thinks it's not like, oh my God, it's so clean. It's beautiful. You people are so friendly. And like, I got all this help and they went, or you're so fun. And it's like, yeah. Everybody who comes here says it. We hosted the FCM conference back in 2022. I got all these mayors coming from across the country, the big city mayors caucus, going like, "Are you pulling our leg here? Like, is it always this clean?" I'm gonna tell you, we have one of the cleanest downtown, and like, people don't feel that way, but I'm gonna tell you on a comparative basis, from a garbage, litter, all of that kind of perspective, we have a beautiful kind of dense downtown from an urban planning perspective. But they come but that's the trick, is you got to get them here,
right?
And we don't have a mountain, and we don't have a mountain, and we don't have an ocean. But some of the most passionate people I know about our city have been here for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. I've been here 25 years. And I will say over and over again, I would not raise my children in another city in this country. And I moved from Saskatoon, just to be clear. Like, I would raise my kids here all over again because it's a down to earth place. The problem with being down to earth is you don't talk about yourself very much.
Yes.
It makes us uncomfortable. And so what's happening at the university in terms of research, what's happening in terms of industry of, wait, that's happening in Regina? Yeah, that's happening in Regina. Well, like, we have weirdly, we have the largest private security company in the country is here. We have space exploration happening here.
Yeah.
We have world-renowned artists here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but we don't, and part of the problem is anybody who goes to talk about themselves, there's a tendency to pile on, going, well, you're not that great. It's like, okay, let's just celebrate. We had some mayors in town for SUMA conventions, Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association. We took them on I contacted Melissa at the Y and said, hey, I got some mayors that want to come and see this, like prairie mayors. And Charlie's looking at me going, how do I get Melissa to Saskatoon? Can't have her. She loves it here. Mayor from Brandon going, like, how did this happen? And I said, sheer will, grit, relentlessness, which is really us. Like, we're just relentless. And then people want to say, well, we don't need that. Well, we don't need that. And it's like, guys, we can have nice things.
Yeah.
And that was a huge amount of federal investment, money coming from the province, us participating on both land and contribution through ISIP. And we can figure out a way to do good things.
Yeah.
Which, well, that's too bold. Don't be too bold. Like, you know what I mean?
Don't be too flashy.
Yeah, don't be too flashy. Yeah, don't be too flashy. But yet, could you sell us to the world?
Yeah.
Okay. And nobody's got that amount of money. Yeah.
Yeah. No one does. That's very true.
So you've talked a lot about access to the table and to discussions and to just hearing different viewpoints. So how do you work with local women's organizations or advocacy groups to ensure their voices are heard in decision making? You spoke a little bit about it with Indigenous groups and, other groups, but is that a step kind of when you put together policies or committees that you think of that's a part of the process already in engaging different groups to ensure they're part of the conversation? Or how do you work with different groups?
Yeah. And not just me. I think what's a really important part is we have a lot of engagement that happens through administration when we're advancing something. And so I will say from a community outreach perspective and community engagement perspective, and I'm not a huge fan of online surveys. You got to do them just to kind of take a temperature test, but it's really one-on-one, ensuring that everybody understands what you're trying to do, but also understanding how they view it. I think making sure there's access at those tables, but it is women-led organizations. It's and you can get caught though where it's always the same people, and so you do sometimes have to stop and go, okay, how do we make the tent bigger? And the difficulty is that someone who is coming in with a closed mind or a lot of anger and resentment can shut down conversation. And so it's a delicate balance of creating a safe space where we just want to hash this out, to not having someone come in, because the moment someone starts going, like, it's palpable in a room where everything just shuts down.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, so we shouldn't have invited that person. And it's not that that's not a valid opinion, but it is about creating space where people feel they can say anything in a respectful way that's contributing to polishing the stone, I call it. It's like we started with something. How do we polish this up? And what are we trying to achieve?
Right.
Yeah. So it is access. And it's about, sometimes folks will reach out. Hey, do you know anybody here? I go, I do. Who do you want to meet? And you text somebody, and you become a connector, right?
Yeah.
I think that's as important, where someone says, hey, I need to talk to somebody about something. I said, oh, well, why don't I'll touch base with so-and-so, and then they might know who so-and-so is. It is actually a gift of the city of Regina. There's an access piece, which I think doesn't exist in Calgary. It doesn't exist in Edmonton or Winnipeg. They're just too big. And we're just this kind of big little town, or big little big town. I'm not sure which. Yeah. I think it's about ensuring access, but you do have to stop and reflect all the time, because you do get into a groove where you've developed relationships with folks, and you know how each other speaks, you know how each other, and you're like, okay, how do we hash this out? It's the next step of, who else should I talk to who might come at me in a contradictory way that is helpful? Because you don't want people who agree with you all the time.
Right.
No, yeah.
But you don't want people who shut conversation down either.
Right.
And so there's a balance there.
Yeah. You need the balance, and you need all the perspectives, because then also that's how you make decisions and make the city better. And
hopefully,
yeah,
that's the plan. That's always the goal.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, I mean, we've taken a lot of your time today, but we have one more question, which is, what advice do you have for other women, girls, any folks who want to enter politics, whether as mayor or running for city council? We know that there's lots of women running for city council this year. What advice do you have for anybody?
Number one, why not you? It's a great question. Why not you? Don't self-select out. Test it. Test how you're viewing things with trusted people who are good thinkers, I think. And then make sure the people who love you harder is one of it. But there is a massive amount of support out there. If you've built relationships, again, are open-minded, do the research, become informed about things. And you have to be informed about the contradictory viewpoints from yours too, right? Because you're going to have to deal with them. And if you shut yourself down from it, you're just going to end up in a pickle. You're going to end up in a bit of a pickle. You got to understand in order to know how to communicate. So I think just being really informed about what the topics and issues are. And I would always caution anybody, we don't need single issue folks. Right? We need people who are open-minded to all of the opportunities and challenges that exist, because they're big. Right? They're big money resourcing issues. They're big in terms of the impact on generations. If you think about domestic violence as an example, they're big when it comes to investment in infrastructure that supports economic growth. Those are generational decisions you need to make. And so ask yourself, I always think self-reflection, self-awareness is a huge piece of it. Everybody should go through an exercise every now and again, and you should be continuously doing that throughout your life. But I would go back to, why not you? Like, if you're passionate and you volunteer, there's a piece of volunteerism to it, which you cannot avoid, right? Because of the time that you're putting in. And then making sure that your family around you, your friends around you, whatever your chosen family is that let them kind of scrub the idea a little bit, because it will make it better in the long run. Right? You never get to say everything you're thinking.
True.
You guys might get to.
We have the microphones.
Not always. Yeah.
But I honestly, there's a piece of why not you, and get involved. Volunteer. Like, get out into the community so that you can expand your understanding and knowledge. Like, honestly, it's been one of the most amazing gifts of this job, is the things I have learned about everything and about myself. And some of them are technical, some of them societal, lots of it is cultural. It's amazing. Like, it's a really cool thing.
Yeah. That we would, I mean, not in politics, and we're not running for mayor, but even just like, we've been around for 5 years, and how much we've grown as humans just by putting ourselves out there and being challenged and being asking questions, but also having questions asked of us, has really changed how we think about things and how we include people and how we start conversations and all of that. So I think that that's exactly what you said. And I think that goes for whether you want to go into politics or you want to just keep living your life.
I just want to add, because there's a contradiction in its nature, which is it makes you harder and it makes you softer at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Like it it solidifies up things, which is nope, that's a time waster. We're not dealing with that, which is well, she's not, and it makes you softer about, I had no idea. Right. And okay, I get it now. I get what these opportunities or challenges or joy, things that bring people joy or suffering, but it also makes you less tolerant of kind of the BS that goes with it.
Yeah, totally.
Don't we all have to be less tolerant of BS?
Oh, yes. Well, I think one big kudos to you is that, we talked about if you can see, you can be it. And this year we have multiple women running for mayor, which is check mark in my books, right? Yeah. Like I don't know if that would have happened if we had not had you in the first place. So I love that. I love that we're seeing that. And best of luck to you moving forward.
So much. I appreciate the time so much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. So that was great. I mean, I feel like I've learned so much about even just her as a person, because we've obviously seen her like in the media and like in the public eye, but just
heard her speak a million times.
Totally.
But you never really get to see the true person and understand, like she said, no one really understands me or knows me except for my family and friends. And like, that's hard, right?
Yeah, it is hard, especially when you're like, even she said she serves the office of the mayor. She's not like, there's just like all these different roles she has to play and balance and being that like the like not enough and too much and like we're to live in between. And I think that every woman in politics deals with that as well. So very interesting. Yeah. So if you are listening to this before November 13th, I think is the voting date. Make sure your voice is heard. There are 11 folks running for mayor in this city, and then countless council members, especially women council members this year, which is great. Yes. So make your voice heard.
I do want to note too that RaiseHER is nonpartisan. So I just want to throw that out there. So while we had Sandra Masters on, we love her. She's great. This isn't necessarily an endorsement for her. So please take the information though that she shared and consider it in your voting. But also know that there's many other candidates this year.
Yeah. You have a lot to
which
choose
is
from.
Great. Yeah. But just be informed. Take the time to learn, to educate, to research, and make your decision. And just above all, just make sure you vote.
Yeah. And just make a decision and have your voice heard.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up today's episode, let's focus on the powerful steps that we can take to create real change for women in politics. So a UN report offers some great ideas on how to increase women's participation in government, and it's clear change is possible. It is coming. First, countries that use gender quotas and balanced appointments see more women in leadership roles. It's proven that when these systems are in place, women's voices are stronger. Second, we need to end violence against women in politics. I mean, end violence overall, but specifically for this episode in politics. This isn't just about safety. It's about creating fair and just spaces where women can lead without fear. Governments must step up, enforce laws, and hold those who spread hate accountable, especially online. Third, equal treatment of women voters and candidates is a must. We need policies that protect women at polling stations, encourage their participation, and make elections fair for everyone.
I like that point. Even like making voting a safe space for women, right? And like bringing your kids. Like I know a lot of questions where can we bring our kids? Like how do we occupy our kids and keep it quiet while we're doing this? And I was just voting the other day, and there's not a lot. I didn't bring my kids, even though my daughter really wanted to come. Like, I only have so much time to get this done, and I don't know if I'm standing in a line.
Yeah,
but if I did, there's not really a lot of like things to occupy kids.
No,
and
it's boring.
So just to know, let's think about that for the next. In the next 4 years, I think we can get something accomplished.
Hopefully.
But the next thing that we can do is support. Governments should invest in training for women candidates, helping them build the skills to lead. Regulating campaign finances so women get the resources they need is a big step forward. And finally, fair media coverage. And we talked about this, or we'll be getting into this a little bit later on episode about the media, but media should highlight women's participation in a balanced, unbiased way without feeding into harmful stereotypes about women. So again, we see women in general in a different way than we see men, especially when they're a public figure.
Yeah.
Let's start to change our perception of what those roles are.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, these changes are about more than politics. They're about building a future where women's voices are heard, valued, and respected. So let's keep pushing for a world where women can step into leadership roles without barriers, step into politics without barriers. We're not just asking for seats at the table, we're building the table.
We are building the frickin'
We're building our own table if we have to. Let's be real.
So thank you for joining us today as we confronted these terrifying but very real life statistics and stories impacting women and girls. Please share this episode, rate and subscribe wherever you are listening, and stay tuned for more ways to make a positive impact. Together, we can make the world a little less scary for women and girls.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at RaiseHER Co and scaries.podcast and on TikTok at RaiseHER Co. And remember that change starts with awareness and action. I'll repeat that. Change, we're in a state of change right now, starts with awareness, education, and then action. So with that in mind, thank you so much for being part of the Scaries community and making this world a little less scary to exist as a woman.
Bye.
Bye.